The Witness is a 2016 puzzle game made by Thekla Inc. and Jonathan Blow. It is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful, thoughtful pieces of media that I've ever consumed. And I know that's a lot, but stick with me. I think it's important. The game takes place on an uninhabited island and is centered around deceptively simple line puzzles. These puzzles are like mazes, with a start and end, but the complexity comes from the growing set of rules one must learn to complete the puzzles. It's a beautiful game that features a wide variety of environments that are somehow crammed onto the small island without ever feeling crowded. Like a Disney theme park, the environments envelop the area they occupy through clever use of sightlines. What makes this game important, though? There's tons of great puzzle games, like Portal or Tetris, even Peggle. Am I saying those games aren't important? Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to say that The Witness has aspirations beyond being a puzzle game. It's attempting to do stuff that even a great story-driven puzzle adventure like Portal doesn't shake a stick at. To get to the heart of some of what The Witness is saying, we have to take a step back. A lot of steps back. What's the point in being alive? More exactly, what's the point in being aware that I'm alive? This question is often overlooked or taken for granted. For most in the modern world, when pushed, the answer would probably involve freedom. That being the notion that our consciousness allows us the ability to perceive ourselves outside of ourselves and make decisions. This kind of freedom, whether it's bestowed by God or happenstance, is what allows humans to be complete moral creatures. Without the ability to decide, we'd be unaccountable to ourselves. Imagine a world where we are not free to decide how we act. Praise for good behavior is pointless, and punishment is needlessly cruel. That kind of world is distasteful to most people. The 20th century existentialist philosopher Paul Sartre wrote extensively on the subject. He said that humans don't just exist with freedom, but more fundamentally, as freedom itself. He said that it's pointless to think of freedom in any context that isn't human, because it ultimately doesn't exist without us. He was maybe a bit harsher to our animal friends than we would be today, but I believe his point still stands. It's foolish to think of a rock as having freedom. It just is what it is. The rock may be acted on by other forces, but there's nothing within the rock propelling it toward a new, distinct being. But human beings don't exist in this way. He said we exist simultaneously as what we are and what we're moving ourselves to become. You are a collection of memories about the past, but you're also made up of dreams of the future, emotions in the present, and a physical body that carries you through all of it. So trying to define yourself in the same way as the rock is futile. There is, to put it lightly, more going on. Because we are able to choose who we are, to some extent we can't be pinned down. He calls this feature of humanity ontological freedom. Ontology being the effort to understand fundamentally what things are. Let's talk about The Witness. This is a video about The Witness after all. And at this point, I will say major spoilers. Please, if you're interested in the game and want to figure out on your own why I'm hyperventilating about this misclone, go play it. Go play the game, take your time with it, don't use a guide. With that being said, there will still be a lot left to discover, even if you do finish the video. There is something else going on the island. It's not just panels with puzzles on them. There's a few levels of puzzles that exist all around you, in the world itself. Many of them are barely puzzles at all. These are just features in the environment that, if viewed from the right perspective, produce a new kind of image. There are some stunning examples of this. But there also exists another level of puzzles that are really puzzles. You can click on them in everything. Hundreds of them. To the extent that once you have the revelation, you begin to see them everywhere. The game never tells you this. There are a few puzzles that are harder to miss. The river at the top of the mountain is literally signposted, and some of the panels are meant to teach you that the environment itself matters. But there's never a tutorial that says, hey, you can use your puzzle-solving hand anywhere. This means that some players will go through the game never finding the second layer. It is hard to describe how powerful a revelation it is to click on a puzzle in the branches of a tree for the first time. It reshapes the world, gives purpose and power behind things that previously felt superfluous. Here's a review from Wired.com where the reviewer says, quote, "The setting then seems incidental. Why design an intricate, striking setting only to force players to spend dozens of hours looking at tiny screens within screens? The answer came late in the game, when the mountain at the center of the island opened up. The island was a huge puzzle, in which all the others nestled." They go on to say, "The Witness is a sterile, lifeless video game, and the Witness is like the island on which it takes place, a machine to the core. Anything within it that seems lifelike is superficial." Now, that's harsh, but it seems like this reviewer legitimately never found out why the game has a location at all, why it isn't just a series of puzzle panels like a Sudoku book. I won't show you many of them, but I will show you my favorite puzzle in the whole game. If one does find the environmental puzzles, the player begins to look at the world that they've spent potentially tens of hours in a completely different way. The curves of rocks or the shadow of a tree take on a whole new light. The player is no longer just looking at the world, but looking through it to the puzzle underneath. You can spend hours scanning the island for the hundreds of hidden puzzles. And once one steps away from the game, it isn't rare to see these same shapes all around in real life. And this is where it all starts to come together in the vague, opaque way that it can. The Witness is offering an alternative to human freedom. There are no choices one makes in the game, apart from engaging with it at all. There are no BioWare morality options or skill trees. The game is about experiencing, about witnessing life, not controlling it. The puzzles one finds in the game are pointless. They don't do anything. The player is only expected to see them, understand them, very much how we as people are thrown into a confusing mess and expected to sort it out all for ourselves. The Witness finds peace in not knowing. It is content with learning for the sake of learning. So to contrast with Sartre's ontological freedom, we could call this ontological perception. It isn't that we are free. We are actually terribly limited in our choices. What we are is perception itself. We're the eyes and ears and minds of the world. Whether these things are free or not seems pointless if the real goal is simply to experience. As Carl Sagan said,
"The surface of the Earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. On this shore, we've learned most of what we know. Recently, we've waded a little way out, maybe ankle deep, and the water seems inviting. Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return. And we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
After a number of puzzles, very possibly one of the last locations the player goes to, on top of the mountain, the player finds an audio recording that puts all of this far more succinctly and eloquently than I can.
Up there, you go around every hour and a half, time after time after time. You wake up usually in the mornings, and just the way that the track of your orbits go, you wake up over the Mideast, over North Africa. As you eat breakfast, you look out the window as you're going past, and there's the Mediterranean area, and Greece, and Rome, and North Africa, and the Sinai, the whole area. And you realize that in one glance, that what you're seeing is what was the whole history of man for years, the cradle of civilization. And you go around down across North Africa and out over the Indian Ocean and look up at that great subcontinent of India, pointed down toward you as you go past it. And Ceylon off to the side, Burma, Southeast Asia, out over the Philippines, and up across that monstrous Pacific Ocean. Vast body of water. You've never realized how big that is before. And you finally come up across the coast of California and look for those friendly things. Los Angeles and Phoenix and on across El Paso. And there's Houston. There's home. And you look, and sure enough, there's the Astrodome. And you identify with that, you know? It's an attachment. And down across New Orleans, and then looking down to the south, and there's the whole peninsula of Florida laid out. And all the hundreds of hours you spent flying across that route, down in the atmosphere, all that is friendly again. And you go out across the Atlantic Ocean and back across Africa. And you do it again, and again, and again. And that identity, that you identify with Houston, and then you identify with Los Angeles, and Phoenix, and New Orleans, and everything. And the next thing you recognize in yourself is you're identifying with North Africa. You look forward to that. You anticipate it. And there it is. That whole process begins to shift of what it is you identify with. When you go around it in an hour and a half, you begin to recognize that your identity is with that whole thing. And that makes a change. You look down there, and you can't imagine how many borders and boundaries you crossed again and again and again. And you don't even see them. At that wake-up scene, the Mideast, you know there are hundreds of people killing each other over some imaginary line that you can't see. From where you see it, the thing is a whole, and it's so beautiful. And you wish you could take one from each side in hand and say, look at it from this perspective. Look at that. What's important? And so a little later on, your friend, again those same neighbors, another astronaut, the person next to you goes out to the moon. And now he looks back and sees the Earth not as something big where he can see the beautiful details, but he sees the Earth as a small thing out there. And now that contrast between that bright blue and white Christmas tree ornament and that black sky, that infinite universe, really comes through. The size of it, the significance of it, it becomes both things. It becomes so small and so fragile, and such a precious little spot in that universe that you can block it out with your thumb. And you realize that on that small spot, that little blue and white thing is everything that means anything to you. All of history and music and poetry and art and war and death and birth and love, tears, joy, games, all of it is on that little spot out there that you can cover with your thumb. And you realize that that perspective, that you've changed, that there's something new there. That relationship is no longer what it was. And then you look back on the time when you were outside on that EVA and those few moments that you had the time because the camera malfunctioned, that you had the time to think about what was happening. And you recall staring out there at the spectacle that went before your eyes. Because now, you're no longer inside something with a window looking out at a picture. But now you're out there, and what you've got around your head is a goldfish bowl, and there are no limits here. There are no frames. There are no boundaries. You're really out there, over it, floating, going 25,000 miles per hour, ripping through space, a vacuum, and there's not a sound. There's a silence, the depth of which you've never experienced before. And that silence contrasts so markedly with the scenery and the speed with which you know you're going. That contrast, the mix of those two things, really comes through. And you think about what you're experiencing and why. Do you deserve this? This fantastic experience? Have you earned this in some way? Are you separated out to be touched by God to have some special experience here that other men cannot have? You know the answer to that is no. There's nothing that you've done that deserves that earned that. It's not a special thing for you. You know very well at that moment, and it comes through to you so powerfully that you're the sensing element for man. You look down and see the surface of that globe that you've lived on all this time, and you know all those people down there. They are like you. They are you. And somehow you represent them when you are up there. A sensing element, that point out on the end, and that's a humbling feeling. It's a feeling that says you have a responsibility. It's not for yourself. The eye that doesn't see does not do justice to the body. That's why it's there. That's why you're out there. And somehow you recognize that you're a piece of this total life. You're out on that forefront and you have to bring that back somehow. And that becomes a rather special responsibility. It tells you something about your relationship with this thing we call life. And when you come back, there's a difference in that world now. There's a difference in that relationship between you and that planet, and you and all those other forms of life on that planet, because you've had that kind of experience. It's a difference, and it's so precious. And all through this, I've used the word you because it's not me. It's not Dave Scott. It's not Dick Gordon, Pete Conrad, John Glenn. It's you. It's us. It's we. It's life. It's had that experience. And it's not just my problem to integrate. It's not my challenge to integrate, my joy to integrate. It's yours. It's everybody's. Russell Schweickart, 1975.
Thanks for watching my video. You should go play The Witness. I promise I didn't ruin everything. And if you'd like to support me in my efforts making content like this, give me a like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, that whole deal. Thanks again.